Hey guys, my name is Zach in VR and welcome back to another episode of the Custom Blocks series. Today I'll be telling you how to make your own custom redstone-powered block. Now before I start the video, I want to give credit where credit is due. The inspiration for the entire Custom Blocks series comes from Zachary, who is the owner of the Undercraft server, and he had come up with these custom blocks himself. I since improved the data pack and have showcased it here, so big shout out to Zachary. I will link his channel in the description, although he has unlisted or privated every video that he's uploaded, but if he ever uploads again, then he'll be linked there for you. Now this tutorial will use elements from all three of the previous parts, and they are all linked in the description, and they'll also be linked in the iCards as they become relevant. However, I only really require you to watch the first part to really get a good understanding of how these custom blocks work, and the other two are optional, and I'll reiterate kind of what we discussed in those videos in this one. Also, this tutorial currently exclusively only works for 1.17, and it will also work for all later versions as well. So I'm currently doing this in 1.17.1, as you can see in the top right here. As the game updates, I'll provide information in the description as to how to upgrade the data pack to the newer versions of the game, as I've been doing for my other parts so far. Anyway, let's get straight into it. So for this episode, I prepared this cow launcher here. So I'm just going to do a quick demonstration of how this actually works. So it orients itself much like any of your normal redstone components, like your dispensers and your droppers would. So it goes in all of the directions, much like the directional 2 block we made in the last video. And if you power it, it just launches a cow in the direction that you've placed it in. Just thought this would be a fun little device for demonstration purposes. And so it works in all of the 6 directions, and this command block will just get rid of all those. So you're probably wondering, how does this even work? Now, if you're paying attention, I actually right-clicked on the block and it displayed the command block dialog. So this command block is going to show us what the block is underneath the armor stand here. So as with all these custom blocks, there's an armor stand, and if I go into spectator mode, we can actually see that there is this command block under here. So this block is mirroring exactly what is in this block. If I destroy this, that will also go away, and if I replace it, it'll come back. So obviously you can power it with redstone, much like a command block behaves. So the command block is used as the base of the block in order to allow it to have its redstone powering behavior. Now you might be wondering, if this is a command block, how am I supposed to mine it in survival mode? Or how's an unopt player supposed to mine it in creative mode, since unopt players cannot destroy command blocks even in creative mode? Well, I have developed a way to allow the players to do this. So currently the base block is a command block, but if I hold this pickaxe and if I look at the block, it will turn into cobblestone. Now there is a little bit of a drawback with this system. If you are near enough to the block and you hold a pickaxe, you'll not be able to activate the cow launcher. So if I come up here and I try this again, and I hold my pickaxe and I try and flick this lever, you'll see that it won't activate because this block is no longer a command block, it's now a pickaxe. So how does this actually work? If I hold the pickaxe and I turn on hitboxes, you will see that there is this hitbox. Now this is an area effect cloud, and it's designed such that the hitbox of the area effect cloud will always cover the entirety of this block, no matter what angle you're looking at it. It does go a little bit over, but this is just to make sure that we get the block within the hitbox. If we come a little bit closer, you'll see that the hitbox of the area effect cloud actually becomes a little bit smaller than the block, but if I get too much closer, it'll disappear entirely. And the reason for this is if you're so close to the block, like I said, this hitbox no longer covers the whole block. Therefore, the block will just become cobblestone and you can mine it just fine. Of course, I'm in creative mode, but if I do go into survival, you can see I mine this just fine. And the reason this works is in 1.17 there's a new feature which allows you to detect whether or not you're looking at an entity. Within this certain range, which is 2 to 5 blocks, we're detecting whether or not we're looking at this area effect cloud, and if we are, then it's a cobblestone block, and if not, it's a command block. Now let's head into the data pack and see how this works. So here we are in the data pack, and as you can see, I'm no longer using Notepad++, and I'm now using Visual Studio Code. Now, before I get started, I just want to note that the data pack that I've created and the resource pack will be linked in the description. So if I'm going a little too fast and you want to try and understand what's going on, or you just want to copy the code for yourself, then feel free to download the data pack and the corresponding resource pack, which will allow this to work. So basically the cow launcher code in the main function is down here. Now the placing and destroying of this block is exactly the same as part 1, except for the destroying, we now check for 2 different blocks. We check for both the cobblestone block and the command block because, well, the base block can be either one of those. So let's quickly go into the place function. So as you can see, this is very similar to the directional 2 block from the 3rd part of the series. So we check for the different types of rotation and we assign the direction accordingly. Of course, if you don't want this to be a directional block, you can just have the one line, much like all these other blocks, like block 1 here. If I go into the place function here, you just have this one line, much like what we did in the first part. Anyway, back into the launcher one. So for each of these directions, not only do we have it orient itself correctly, but we also add another tag for the different directions as well, and this will become relevant later. Now there's also a second thing that this function does that none of the other place functions currently do, and it is this function which summons a marker right in the middle of the custom block with the launcher tag as well. Coming back to the main function, we can now start to take a look at how to change the base block of our redstone-powered block. So firstly, we want to execute as all players with this special predicate called custom block pickaxe, and we want to summon a marker at their eyes, because remember, we want to detect whether or not their eyes are within 2 to 5 blocks of the center of the block. So by summoning a marker at their eyes, we can check for that more easily. Now this predicate that I've mentioned is very similar to what we did back in part 2 of the series for the axe block. So for the axe block, when we were destroying the block, we actually checked for this predicate called break2, and basically that checked whether or not we had a diamond or netherite axe. The syntax for these predicates has actually changed slightly with the items tag. Previously, you could only have one singular item, and we had to use the Minecraft alternative to specify multiple different conditions. Now we can specify items in a list. So in this case, it's the diamond and netherite axe. Now in our new predicate, which is pickaxe, we do the same thing, except we check for the different kinds of pickaxes. So these can be whatever tool you want your custom block to be mined with, whether it's all pickaxes or all axes or a potato. Like, it doesn't really matter, just as long as someone in survival can physically mine that block with that item, you should be fine. Again, back in the main function, now we move to the next bit. So if the player's eyes are within 5 blocks, we want to run a few further checks to see if they're within 2 blocks and stuff like that. Otherwise, we set the block to a command block. We execute as all of the markers in the center of the launchers. Then we check if the marker at the player's eyes are within 5 blocks, and we run the function custom block launcher / looking at. And so that will run these further checks that I mentioned back here. The second command just replaces the if with unless, and then at the end, instead of moving on to the further checks, we set the block to a command block with the appropriate command, as you can see here. There we go. So I'll explain this command in a little bit, But now let's look at the looking at function. So firstly, we want to check if the marker at the player's eyes is within 2 blocks of the center of the launcher. And then if so, we want to set the block to cobblestone so it can be mined. And so this was in the case that the player is actually so close to the launcher that the hitbox of the area effect cloud would become too small. So we just disregard checking that and we just set it to cobblestone. Now in the second line, we check if it's within 2 to 5 blocks. And if so, we run the next function, which does some even further checks. And so if I go into that function, here we can see that what we first do is we execute as the launcher eye, and we face at S, which is the marker, and we summon the area effect cloud 1 block in front of that facing direction. Now the area effect cloud has some properties. It has a duration of 2. If at a duration of 1, it instantly disappears, which is not what we want. The radius is 0.25 because area effect clouds have a half block height, so their square radius, so to say, should be 0.25 in order to make it a cube. And the particle, just make sure there's no particles. And then tags, we use the tag launcher as well, or whatever your tag is for your own block. Next, we move on to the next line, which executes at the launcher eyes again. This time we want to shift the position down to the player's feet, and we want to check if the player has another predicate, which is this custom block launcher look. Now, if I go into this predicate, we can see the new feature in 1.17, which is this looking at tag. This allows us to check the properties of the entity that is being looked at by the player. So here we check that the NBT tag has the tag launcher, and we check that it's an area effect cloud. So back in looking at 2, so we've checked the predicate, and if so, we then set the block to cobblestone so it's able to be mined. And if not, which is this line, then it sets it to a command block. So let's go quickly over what this command actually does. So the command in the command block runs as the armor stand to which the block is based on, and we run another function called the power function. So this was what happens when the block is actually powered by redstone. So if I go into that function now, we see this function. So what this function does is for each of the different directions, we specify how the cow should be summoned. So if it's up, we summon on top of the block, which is the position of the armor stand, and we summon it with upwards motion, which is determined by this tag. And for all of these other ones, we similarly specify where the cow should be placed and what kind of motion it should have. Notice for the down one, we shift to minus 2.5 blocks below so that the cow's hitbox doesn't actually collide with the launcher. Now, of course, with your own redstone components, these functions can be anything you want. It may or may not specify these tags, and if it doesn't, then you probably don't need them back in the place function. You probably won't need these tags, but it's good just to have them anyway, especially if you do decide to use them. But if not, they can be ignored. Now back in the main function again, after we've done all of that and all of the different functions, we finally kill the marker eyes for every player. Likewise here in the destroy function, when the block is broken, we also want to kill the marker in the middle of the block. Now if you found any of that confusing, please leave a question down in the comments and I'll be happy to answer it and try and clarify anything I might have missed or it was a bit confusing for you, because there is a lot going on in this data pack. Now that that's done, let's go back into the world to finish up the video. Now before I wrap up, I just wanted to use this part of the video to share some news about the channel and stuff. So firstly, instead of making separate data packs and resource pack links for each video, I'm going to just use the most updated version of the data pack so that whatever version you're in, you can always download the data pack and the resource pack and it will work in your version of the game. Now this may include some more features than the video you've watched, but that's fine. You can, for the most part, just ignore those and it will be just fine. Also, if you haven't noticed yet, I actually did a few live streams in which I made this starter pack, or at least a good amount of it, for this video. So if you're interested, a playlist to those streams will be linked in the description. And when I get to making part 5 of this series, I'm probably going to stream again, so keep an eye out for that. One final thing, any feedback is greatly appreciated. If you found this helpful, if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer you, as I have been in the past, to a lot of different people, particularly people commenting on the first video. I've really enjoyed reading all those questions and answering them. Now I only have 1 or 2 more videos planned for this custom block series, so if you have any ideas, please leave them in the comments below. Anyway guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you next time.